Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been guided and inspired to do thanks to my energetic connection with Kata Judah. Kata Judah is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, our sacred feminine site. So what I'm here to do is to give a platform to men so they can share their journey into the heart, their highs, their lows, tools, practices, insights, wisdom, knowledge. What have they picked up along the way that they can now share with other men walking this path? And of course, us women who are walking right there beside them. Today's guest is a man called Mikaal Bates, and he is a transformational coach specializing in men's work and conscious relationships. So really excited to be talking to Mikaal and hearing all about his journey into the heart. Enjoy. Hello, welcome, Mikaal Bates, all the way from Colorado. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And the reason I asked Mikaal to come on is I saw recently his latest project, which he's doing a podcast about men and masculinity, and he's talking man to man, which I thought was the perfect complement, obviously, for, you know, what I'm doing as well. And the more, the better. So we'll get right into that towards the end of the show, but just letting people know that if you don't catch all the show, the link will be below, and it's called Remasculation. So yeah,
Right.
how's
That's
it going?
right.
Yeah, how's it going, the show?
It's going great. It's it's been something I've been working on. It's been a brainchild of mine for years now. For about 4 years, it's been sort of percolating in my psyche. I guess it's been a long gestation period. Usually things take about 9 months to be born, and this took quite a bit longer. But it's been a real labor of love. I think it was kind of figuring out what it wanted to be, and I really was figuring out how I wanted to talk about things, because the last thing that this show is anti-woman. The last show this thing is anything other than just bringing a bit of focus to the excellence in men and to some societal wide patterns that I've seen in my own personal experience and the work that I do as a men's coach, as a men's work facilitator. Some themes that have sort of emerged really in the last century, but particularly in the last 40 years, and I think particularly in the last few years, where we'll get into it, I'm sure, but where there's an unfortunate thing I'm seeing with men sort of standing down in the way that I don't think any of us wants. We don't want weak men. We don't want men who are afraid to be themselves. We certainly don't want men who are abusing or in any way overstepping. But yeah, the tagline of the show is that men are not toxic, men are the answer. So my intention is to be a little punchy, to bring a little bit of what's this guy talking about here, and lean into some of the difficult conversations that I really think we're ready to have now as a society, and certainly I think within the spiritual community, or so-called in those realms. They're already happening. So
yeah, definitely. I'm really excited to expand fully into that towards the end of the show. But let's find out a little bit about you and what brought you to be the man you are today. So first of all, I always like to ask the men, who are you without your labels? Who's the man inside?
That's a wonderful question. And it's one that I've actually been spending some time with, because as much as this is a labor of love, and the work that I do is very much my purpose. There has been a lot of stress that I've been experiencing lately in the last few years of I need to be this, or I should be that, and these are the questions that I ask my men, obviously, how do I want to be a man in the world? So without all those things, I'm very much still a little kid at heart. There's a part of me that never grew up, and I hope never does all the way. Part of that, I think, is sort of what I talk about in my work, where we've lost the rites of passage, particularly the ones from adolescence to, in this case, manhood, the boyhood to manhood transitions that we really used to have cross-culturally across the planet, that we've really lost. So I think there is like there is with every movement, and we'll talk about this in the show, the shadow of the little kid in me that didn't get to go through those rites of passage and become a man in the way that I think maybe I could have or wanted to. But then there's the beautiful side of it where it's just I have this playful sense to myself. I love jokes and mucking around and trying not to take myself too seriously. I think it's a pitfall that a lot of us fall into. I know I do. I'm a men's work leader. I need to be a man. I need to be the ha ha ha. And it's like, yeah, sometimes. But if we can't take the piss out of ourselves, for God's sakes, what are we doing? And so that's something I try to bring to the show as well, a bit of humor to it, and a bit of my ability to dance in between worlds, I would say. So
yeah, it's interesting that when you were talking about your childhood, you did touch on your childhood shadow. So what was the most challenging part of little Michael growing up?
I'm not sure if you're familiar with this amazing book. It's one of 4 particular tomes of men's work that I use for my guys and in my group programs and that kind of stuff. It's it's called No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's by an amazing man by the name of Robert Glover. And as a recovering nice guy, what a lot of nice guys report, and myself would be included in this, is I had an amazing childhood. I had a wonderful time growing up. My parents were amazing people, very, very much sort of the hippie persuasion. And my dad was a school teacher. My mom was an actress / astrologer, past life regressionist, clinical hypnotherapist. She's still doing the work, by the way. She's incredible, amazing woman, bold, brave, second wave feminist. And so having that incredible upbringing behind me was a really beautiful thing. But I think the shadow of my upbringing in a way was, in some ways, I want to be very careful how I say this. There was a bit of what I talk about on my show that, looking at it now, I needed and didn't know that I wanted more structure. So less of, it's okay that you or do whatever you want. It's okay, you can grow up to be whoever you want to be. Doesn't, as long as you're happy. That's sort of left leaning, everything's good and we love you just the way you are, and that's beautiful, and it's actually freaking true, which is what's so great about it. But it's not the only thing that's true. So there was definitely a part of me that needed discipline and needed regimentation and needed a bit of a stronger hand and a bit of more of that sort of archetypal masculine fatherly, I love you, son, but that's not acceptable. I love you, Michael, and that's not good enough, and I know you're better than that. So I say that not at all to blame my father. My father's an incredible man. We've done some amazing work together to sort of step into that. But I really view it as both of those sort of ideas are really crucial. And I had a bit of an imbalance in one direction. So anytime there's an imbalance, there's just more of that I would have needed. So in my work recently, I think I've been sort of working to balance that, more structure, more discipline, more traditionally conservative outlooks on just the way I'm going about my life has been really beneficial to me, with the view to balance. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh, definitely. And I love this because we could say that, young parents these days are another revolution of the hippie era where,
Sure.
they're trying to let their children be authentic and not be indoctrinated and all this. So what would you say to parents to help them find this balance?
That's an amazing question. I think just like you do anything else, study. My lady and I are definitely talking about, we got engaged this last year. We're definitely, kids are in the future. I've already done quite a bit of reading and studying, and I aim to do a lot more when she does get pregnant, to just really educate myself beyond ideologies of just, what is the data that we have show about what's the best way potentially to raise kids, what do they tend to need, those kinds of things. So I think for me, I would say to parents that right now, I think there is a lean in the direction of do whatever you want, no rules, no boundaries. We know that kids need boundaries. There's an amazing study that they did. I don't remember, I should remember it. I've used it a few times in some of my writing, but where they had a preschool, it was preschool or kindergarten, where they had, for the outdoor area, like for where the kids went out to play, like for recess, there was just an open area and there was no fence. So it was just open. And what they found was the kids would sort of gather towards the building and would just sort of stay there close to the building. But once they built a fence, like, maybe 40 yards from the building, that during recess, the kids would go all the way to the corners of the fence and they would play and they would explore. So kids need structure. They need the ability to go and explore and do new things. They need guidance. We need to make sure they don't, step on, fall off of a sidewalk or trip and fall. But there's something Osho talked about, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. I don't know if you're familiar with his stuff, but talked about how the way he grew up, he was kind of left alone. And so not interfering with the kids too much, letting them do what they want to do, letting them be themselves, especially when they're younger, making sure they don't hurt themselves. But I think one thing particularly that we need to watch out for are screens. There's a lot of new research coming out because we haven't had screens for a long time. And I know it's tempting to have the instant babysitter of the screen, but we know they're not so good for kids. And reading and writing are really being impaired right now. So I could riff on this all day, but I'm gonna
that's
pause.
great. And I just know also from my work with children need boundaries to feel safe. Exactly what you were saying about preschool. Once that fence was there, they felt safe. So I love what you spoke about there. All right, let's get into your adulthood, Mikaal. What would you say?
Can I actually, I'm super curious, since that's the work that you do, what have you seen in that, like right now, as far as the trends that you're witnessing, just with your front row seat to what's happening right now?
Yeah, well, screens are a massive one. It's that giving children the safety of a boundary and allowing them freedom within that boundary, giving them a boundary wide enough they can spread their wings and expand. That's
I love that.
Where I come from. But let's talk about you.
Sure.
What would you say was your rock bottom moment? And then we'll get into how you spiraled on up from that. What was happening?
So these are great questions, really great questions. I was 35 and my rock bottom moment was, I moved to New York City right after college because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I figured what better place to figure it out than New York. And in so many ways, that was absolutely true. Everything is there and everything is happening there, and time goes by at least twice as fast. So 4 years in New York is like 8 years anywhere else. It just flies. But what I've learned through the work that I do now, going through my own initiatory processes, working with coaches, working with men's work, facilitation work, being facilitated, I realized that from the time I was basically 19, going into college, I knew exactly what I was going to be when I grew up. I was going to be either a professional basketball player or a professional jazz musician, tenor sax player. By age 19, both of those things were gone. And I found myself at university just like, I don't know who I am. Who am I now if I'm not these things? And what I didn't know to look for and what I didn't know to seek out were mentors or teachers that could help me, not tell me what to do, but help me go through my own process of asking me questions to figure out what I wanted to do, because that period just continued. And everybody was like, it's okay, you're 19, you're 20, you're 21, you're 25, you got plenty of time. You're 30, well, you start to figure things out. You're 35. And so basically, I lived an amazing life in New York. I was a bartender. I was an actor. I spent my days working and dating and having an amazing time, and then traveling and coming back and making money again to do that again. But throughout the whole time, there was this burning sensation in me, like, I know I'm supposed to be doing more than this. And I think a lot of people have that. And what I came to learn through the work that I went through is that, and I'm going to be very careful in the way that I say this because I work mostly with men, but most men or even the masculine, so the masculine energetic that every being has on the planet, really needs a purpose and a mission and a goal and something to be striving for. And I'll say personally, I didn't know that that's what I was missing until I learned that, and I discovered that through my sort of journey into men's work, which sort of all culminated with the beginning of my dark night of the soul, hitting 35 and just being like, I'm not a kid anymore. I still don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing? There's nothing starting to be the old guy, at the dance party, or like these types of things where it's like, fuck, like having friends that have started businesses. And in New York, you can kind of be a Peter Pan. You can kind of be, it's kind of supports that. Like you can kind of just continue to party and be flitting around, and it's kind of accepted there, at least to some degree. So I didn't have a lot of outside pressure that, say, some of my friends growing up in more conservative areas. And I've been fortunate to live in a lot of places in this country. I went to college in Florida. My family's in Kentucky. I grew up in LA. I really was raised in New York City, and now I live in Colorado. So I've really been able to get lots of different versions of left, right, conservative, liberal inputs, which I'm so grateful for. But that dark night of the soul started at 35. If you guys know the work of Rudolf Steiner, he sort of, talks about life in these 7-year cycles, and that particularly for men, for all humans, but particularly for men. Again, I'm speaking from my own experience. So 35 to 42, I just turned 43. That 7-year cycle from 35 to 42 was fucking hell. And it was the first time in my life that I was on mission. But it's that midlife crisis. It's the dark night of the soul. And to me, I realized that it was, I try to use not too much mystical language, but my higher self, some part in me was no longer willing to allow me to continue to not know what I was doing in my life. And it came and got me, and it was very unpleasant. And what it really resulted in was depression. And so I think in our society, we have this view of depression as a bad thing, but I didn't have a purpose. I had gone through at least 3 relationships where I thought I'd found my person, and it ended up not being that way. I discovered that I had very much a feminine energetic orientation through my work with David Data and his work, learning about polarity. My life had been organized to focus on love and relationship versus mission and purpose. There's nothing wrong with either of those. But for me, the orientation towards relationship and love over mission and purpose did not result in happiness for me or the amazing women I was dating. I didn't know all of that. I didn't know. I just knew that I wasn't happy. I knew there was something right in front of me that I couldn't quite figure out. And so there was this moment at 35 where I ended up breaking my finger playing football, American football. So we were playing flag. We weren't tackling each other, but I jammed my finger into this guy's hip and broke my finger. And suddenly I couldn't bartend. I had a cast on. I couldn't go to auditions. I couldn't go to yoga. I couldn't go to the gym. All the things that I was doing to fill my life with stuff was taken away. And now it was just me in a room with the aggregate of my unfulfilled life. And it just started to cook me. And it was awful. And then an amazing man handed me a copy of this book, Iron John by Robert Bly. It's to this day the most important book I've ever read. And it was like he'd written this book for me. It's an incredible book. It's based on a very, very, very old 1,000-year-old fairy tale of the transition from boyhood to manhood. And I started to realize the things that I had missed and that were missing in my life. And it was like a psychedelic trip. It really was. Reading this book, it was just like everything started to make sense. And the hidden symbology in my life started talking to me and just sort of telling me, this is why I've been suffering. Oh, this is why I felt this way. Oh, this is what's missing. And so, yeah, at 35 was sort of my first lean into the men's work world. I dove into Iron John stuff, and anyway, that's a very long answer, but
Oh, no, this is great, and we will expand on that. But that book, Iron John, the first time I heard of it was probably about 10 episodes ago of Heart Warriors, and two men in a row mentioned that book. You're the third one. And after the two men in a row mentioned it, I bought three copies, one for each of my sons that are now 21 and 23, and one for me. Haven't looked at it yet, but I've given
oh, thank you for doing that.
yeah, so hopefully they'll read it. You don't know, do you? But anyway, they'll read
You
it.
don't know, and it's
Right.
yeah, it's tough because you're pointing at something that's really interesting, and I think is really a challenge for a lot of women, because there are so many amazing women out there in the world, not just single moms, but just moms trying to raise sons. And there's this really challenging piece in mothers raising sons where there's something very natural in the male children, especially as they get older, they hit adolescence and they start moving into manhood, where it's very normal and natural for them to reject mom and to reject stuff from mom. So a lot of women will ask me, can you get my boyfriend or my husband in one of your men's retreats or one of your coaching programs, or I need a book to give him. And it's like, it's a tricky thing, because there's this idea in men's work that only men can transform boys into men, in the same way I would never presume to be able to help a young woman or a girl transition in through the red tent, through the white tent, and through the traditions into womanhood. I can do my best, and having a father figure there is better than no one, just like having a mother there for those boys is better than nothing. But there's a natural rebellion in men, so it's tricky to try to get your boys or to get your husband or to get your, you have to be, yeah, I'll just say you have to wield your feminine genius in a way to sort of give it without giving it, plant it without overtly, you need to do better, and here's Iron John, that kind of a thing. But
Maybe I did it wrong. Well, I bought them and I left them on the side,
yeah,
and anyway, and then because they don't live at home anymore. One's in Japan. The one that came round, and I said,
yeah,
oh, look, two men in a row, recommended this book, said it changed their lives, so I bought you each a copy.
that's good.
And I
That's
gave
good.
it to him, but I see
Yeah,
that he just put it up in the garage with his stuff. He didn't take it with him, so I don't
yeah,
know what I've got to do there, but say he'll read it when the time's right, I guess.
yeah. And you can just keep circling around on it. But I mean, I think back on opportunities in my life where someone said something or gave me a book that I didn't read, and then 10 years later I read it. I'm like, why didn't I read this book 10 years ago? It would have changed my life. And had I read it 10 years ago, it might not have landed at all.
Right.
So there's something about that I really trust. And that book specifically talks about the three distinct points in a man's life where he goes to the cage where the wild man is enchained. And the wild man is that free part in every man that is wild and untamable and fierce, and is the part that women find so attractive and other men are drawn to in leadership. And how we've allowed ourselves, or society has sort of talked us into putting that part of ourselves in the cage, and how there are these archetypal moments in our life. The final one that Iron John talks about, or that Robert Bly talks about in the book, it's not his story. Again, it's a very old story, is at age 35, which is the age that I was reading the book, which is why I'm just like, who wrote this for me? And it's a profound book. I recommend everyone read it. If you want to understand your men, or men in general, read that book. In the same way I recommend that men read, Clarissa Pinkola Estes' work, Women Who Run with the Wolves, or The Heroine's Journey, Maureen Murdoch, or even Marion Woodman's work, Leaving My Father's House. There's so many powerful tomes in the men's work and women's work field, and we should all be reading them because they're gold, full of gold.
The book you mentioned, David Dida, that's one book that when I first read that, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
What's the one called?
The Way of the Superior Man.
That one. I
Yeah.
learned so much about women and
Oh yeah.
men That's an
Oh yeah.
incredible book. I recommend that for everyone.
It's one of the four that I use for my guys, and I had an amazing opportunity to study or sort of be adjacent to him for a while and assist for a while, and then work with some men that sort of left his world and sort of started our own thing. There's a group I'm so proud to be involved with called Tribe Men's Community, which again, it's sort of a foundation of Data's work. And so Data's work for me is such a unbelievable gift and its own thing in the men's workspace. So the Iron John, King Warrior Magician Lover by Robert Moore, another one of the books that is sort of that 80s and 90s mankind project men's work, mythopoetic ritual rites of passage type of men's work. Joseph Campbell, those type of things. Amazing work. What I found that particular thread is missing is the piece that Data's work brings in, which is the embodiment piece, the presence piece, the way to cultivate and work with the energies of masculinity and femininity, yin and yang, whatever you want to call them, two opposite and equal extremes, and work with that. And that it's very much an equation. And that's, I like to tell the couples I work with, polarity doesn't give a fuck. It doesn't care what body you're in, what your pronouns are, who you're attracted to. It doesn't care. It just, is it working or not? Is there attraction or not? So it's a transcendent principle that I feel like his work brings in. And you mentioned Way of the Superior Man, but Intimate Communion was, I think, his first book that he wrote in 1995. It's still the book that I have all of the couples that I work with read, because he was so ahead of the game. I mean, he's talking about all the things we're talking about now in the 90s, polarity, masculine and feminine, talking about the 50-50 relationship, which is sort of the, as he calls it, the sort of second level of the feminist revolution, where instead of being an independent relationship, men in the male roles, women in the feminine roles, now suddenly it's switching. The women are exploring their masculine side, the men are exploring their feminine side. And there's this switch that's happened. Again, neither good nor bad necessarily. There's been positive things that's created. There's been challenging things that's created. So, but again, just he has a couple books too that he's written specifically for women as well. Like Dear Lover is one of his that is just beautiful. Yeah. So anyone who hasn't read Data's work, I really recommend diving in. It's really special. And yeah, there's some, as there are with books written a while back, there's definitely some languaging differences from, let's say, where we are now. But I have an amazing couple that have been mentors of mine for a while who have a new book coming out, Justin Patrick Pierce and London Angel Winters, who were basically Data showrunners for a really long time, helping produce his work. They had their first book called The Awakened Woman's Guide to Everlasting Love, and their next book is called Playing with Fire. And it's coming out, I think, this month. But to me, they have this updated version of, and just a different flavor. It's not that it's better, it's just different than Data's work. And again, sort of coming out of that wisdom stream, it's profound. So I want to show some love to my mentors. And again, if anyone's looking for, anyone who's read the Data corpus, who's sort of looking for the next piece, I highly recommend those two. They're amazing human beings.
Oh, thank you for those recommendations. I'd like to go back to this rock bottom moment that you had. And you were saying that you were, if I understood correctly, you realized you were focusing more on relationships than purpose. Can we expand on this, Mikaal? Because this is a key
Absolutely.
point, I think. And you were in depression, so it obviously wasn't working for you. So what insights did you come to around relationships and purpose and the balance and priority that's needed with men or the masculine?
Wonderful question. Yeah, this was an insight that came largely as a result of encountering Data's work and then going to an all men's retreat that he led, and being sort of staggered by just what he was bringing in his embodied presence. So for me, the idea, and again, this is a generality, so I want to be very clear with my language here. I'm not saying that this is the way it is always for all men, or this is the way it is always for all women. but there's this idea that really comes from a lot of different traditions. It's a tantric principle. It's a principle that's present in Taoism. It's a principle that's present in, I would say, Gnostic Christianity, and even in the Kabbalah, this idea of two equal opposite extremes. And so there's this idea that hit me like a ton of bricks, which is that most of the time, the masculine or men will generally orient towards a preference of purpose and mission. So what am I here to do? What am I here to bring forward in the world? There's an ancient Greek idea that there's two ways to immortalize yourself. One is a feminine path, which is having children. You immortalize yourself in giving birth to another being who just carries your legacy forward into the world, literally in their body, through your genetic material and your love and your care and all this. But then there's this idea of giving birth through the masculine portal, which is a book, a teaching, an album. Even though they might be more feminine in their expression, we can get into the nuance of music and writing and these things, but sort of putting that forward, having something that you're producing, having something that you're creating and putting out. And obviously these terms are meant to be interchangeable sometimes. I'll always have somebody usually like, well, in the Egyptian mythology, the masculine is the earth. And yes, there are exceptions, because there are always exceptions to every rule. That's what's so beautiful about life. And but I'm interested in having conversations where we can acknowledge that and sort of look at the patterns that exist and have existed for a long time for a reason, because we do need reference points to be able to point to things. So back to my story, in that moment, I realized, literally like being slapped in the face, why I was feeling depressed, why I was feeling sort of stuck. And a big part of it was that I had not done the work to identify what my purpose was, what my mission was. I like to be really careful when I say these things, because your mission can change, your purpose can change. You can have many different missions over the course of a lifetime, and everybody does. But I didn't have anything that I'd done the work to, as I teach my men, to clarify the first piece of clarification of what do I want? Why do I want it? When do I want it? How do I want it? Like getting really clear on that, then bringing consistency in of the practice of how to bring that forward, how to bring it in. Clarity plus consistency creates momentum. Momentum over time creates the change that you're looking for. So there was a formula that I started to discover that has become the basis of the coaching work that I do with not just men, but particularly men, to allow that purpose to start to emerge, to allow that to start to arise. So what often arises, as again, my mentor, Justin Patrick Pierce, once said to me, and I'll paraphrase it, the thing I didn't get became the thing I was meant to give. And so not having a mission, not having clarity, not having purpose, not knowing what I wanted to do, having, waking up and reading Joseph Campbell's work and all these different societies around the planet, every which one that we've studied had these rites of passage traditions that you would have gone through to sort of inform you of your place in the world, in your society, in your immediate family, and in your own psyche. So I started to realize, wow, it's not just me. A lot of people in our society don't know why they get up in the morning. They don't know what it is. They don't have something that's burning inside of them, which to me, purpose became the antidepressant. So I was depressed because I didn't have purpose. I didn't have a mission. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know why I was doing it. I was of the age where I again, stereotypically should have been accruing certain things. Men are often, this is often controversial, but status is often thought of as the thing most attractive in men, whereas beauty is the thing often, not always, thought of as more attractive in women or the feminine. And I had been very much orientating myself in let's say the feminine direction. So I don't think that's a bad thing. You can see it in my gesticulations. Like my energy is very feminine. I'm a musician. I'm an actor. I'm a poet. I'm a writer. I'm so grateful for my feminine qualities. the things that were missing for me. You might look at me and I have a very masculine figure. I'm very tall. I work out. I have that in my physique, but in my energy, very diminutive. And I think largely in my work, I came to discover because my mom had been the energetic masculine being in my family. So very typical of that era, like kind of like the sitcom dad where, and again, my dad's an amazing guy. Like I have no blame for him, but my mom definitely held the masculine energy in my family. So I learned to source my masculine energy from a feminine source. So the way that manifested in my relationships was, what do you want to do, honey? You know, tell me what to do. Tell me how to be. So I started doing that thing that a lot of guys do, which is we turn our women into our moms or our therapists, which is the most depolarizing thing you can do because you're not supposed to fuck your son or your client. So it's worked. You're supposed, that depolarization should be happening. But again, there's a formula at work here. There's a pattern here at work that started to emerge for me at that age of 35, as I started to dive into this work, as I started to explore men's work, polarity, coaching, conscious relating, those kinds of things. So, yeah.
This is fascinating. I'm sure it's something that most men can identify with at some point in their life. But, you know, a lot of men are going through that at the moment as the old world starts to crumble and maybe the new world hasn't been rebuilt in their reality at this point. So I know you did give some great, you did mention some specific steps in that. What can you directly say? Talk directly to those men, please, now, Michael, those that are struggling, but you were at 35. What can you say to them to give them some light?
I don't know is no longer a sufficient answer. It's no longer a sufficient response to your life. Because what I've learned initially in being coached and then in coaching is that I act with the right questioning from my mentor, with the right questions from my coach, we were able to figure out what I wanted and what I needed to do and what my mission was and what my purpose was. So there's something in that mentor-mentee relationship, which is another piece that's archetypally missing in our culture. Traditionally, men would go from their, boys would go from their mother's house from birth to about 11 to 13, and then transition through a rite of passage into father's house and be more in father's house till you're about 18 or 19. And then you would also leave your father's house and go into the mentor's house, where you would have almost like the second father. And it could be, it could be a woman, but just having someone there who's mentoring you, who's helping you clarify, again, clarification being the process of figuring out what you want to do. So for those men out there who are listening, if you're feeling depressed, you're depressed for a reason. If you're feeling anxious, you're anxious for a reason. Anxiety is typically fixation and fear of the future. Depression is typically fear of and fixation on the past. So you can sort of map where your psyche is out of balance. But again, putting in the work, working with a coach, working with a therapist, even therapists generally focus on the past, generally focus on, well, how did you get to where you are now? It's a beautiful thing. It's really important. I love working with clients that also have a therapist. The thing I love about coaching is part of me doesn't give a fuck how you got here. You're here now. Where do you want to go? How do we get you? What's the delta between where you are now and where you want to be? And we can break that down into very, as my acting teacher said, bite-sized bits, small steps that you can take over time that will actually get you to the place you need to be if you take those steps. And what we know is that the sensation of fulfillment, the actual felt embodied sense of fulfillment in life comes, especially for men, not from achieving the goal, but from going on and being in the process of working towards the goal, looking back and being able to see your progress on that line. That's what actually produces positive emotion in the male brain. also in the human brain. Again, this isn't to say that women can't do this. That's not at all what I'm saying. Again, I work mostly with men, and I'm speaking from my own lived experience as a man in a male body. So, but it was fascinating to me, because as soon as I started to live into my purpose, as soon as I started to get clear on what that was, and then start trying to take steps in that direction, it didn't happen all at once. Turned out I also had some mold poisoning issues that I'm still working through, which in and of themselves can create depressive experiences. So it's not to say that if you're depressed, it's just because you're not living your purpose. There are definitely neurological issues that exist. There are definitely physiological challenges that can be impacting that. But I think mostly most people in our society are depressed because they haven't figured out why they're alive. And we used to have a stronger religious substructure that sort of existed underneath us as a culture that gave us that meaning. We've sort of, God is dead, knock that out. It's, again, neither good nor bad necessarily, though, I don't know, we do seem to have a crisis of meaning in the world. So whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, we'll see where it goes. But to the degree you can find meaning in your life is the degree to which your life starts to give you, whether neurochemically or whatever, the positive reinforcement. You go to the gym, your body says, thank you, have some dopamine. You drop into an eye gaze practice of entrainment with your partner or with another fellow man in a men's retreat, your body rewards you with oxytocin, it rewards you with serotonin. We know this now, which is what's so cool about it. So it's not just hippie conjecture or anecdotes, it's real deal stuff. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Michael. I'm really interested in now, from a man living his purpose, and I know you can only speak for yourself, but I'd also like to get a general view from your professional experience.
Sure.
What would you say is the percentile that you put into your purpose and that you put into your relationship?
That's a great question. I think, well, I know that the percentage is still not balanced to the degree that it could be. And I know that from the feedback that my woman gives me, to the degree that I feel on fire and confident in my purpose is the degree that she feels attraction to me. So again, my habit has been to, and again, everybody's different. So there are people out there where it's gonna not only feel good, but it's also going to result in the thing that you want from your partner to be in that orientation. And there are people that are very balanced, that have a balance of masculine and feminine. So that exists. I'm not in any way saying that anybody needs to be this way or anybody needs to be that way. You hear anybody saying shit like that, run the other direction. And so for me, it's very much, my life has improved drastically. I'll put it that way. My life has improved drastically to the degree that I started putting more time and energy into the things that I used to poo-poo when I was younger. So stability, structure, things like getting a QuickBooks account and getting all of my financial realities together in one place. The structuring that we were talking about, right? That kids need, the boundary part. So I had the boundaryless, improvisational, free spirit in the wind thing down pat. I had plenty of that. In fact, I had too much of that. So to the degree that I continue to dive into my purpose, my new podcast is very much the latest iteration and emanation of that. I've been getting messages to do it for years. And to be honest, I've been kind of scared because it feels really big. So there's an idea of, there's certain types of fear that you should run away from, like a mountain lion or a grizzly bear, or what do you guys have in Australia? Great whites or, something like that. Yeah. Run away from that. But there's another type of fear that generally will come up as the metric of success of you having identified a piece of your deep core purpose. And I mean, like, why you're on the planet. Like, you're not just here to work at Amazon and, God bless, maybe some people are, right? There's nothing wrong with Amazon necessarily. But again, in my experience, if I push someone, if I ask them a series of questions, and when I've been asked a series of questions, it's possible to get to the bottom of something that will produce some type of response in the body, the pileoerection of, the hairs on the back of your neck, the things on the skin, the gasping of the
Tension of the
breath.
heart.
Yes, your body is going to tell you, your spirit is going to tell you, everything is going to align and say this thing. And, it might be that you're supposed to, oh my God, I think I'm supposed to have the most successful podcast for men on planet Earth. Who the fuck am I to think I can be that guy? Oh, really? You're going to be bigger than, Aubrey Marcus and Jordan Peterson and, all these epic men that are, guiding in different sides of the political spectrum potentially. It's like, who am I to be that? So that's where the work comes in. What are the limiting beliefs that are in the way for you? What's the double bind in your system? Where are you pushing down the gas and the brake at the same time? Where is that generally early childhood wound or conditioning that is actively working against the thing you're supposed to do, not because it's evil, but because it's trying to keep you safe? So how do we bring those abandoned parts of our psyche, and to use the Jungian idea, back home? How do we integrate those pieces of ourselves? So that's the work.
I love this. And I love hearing the story behind, the birth of the podcast, because for me, I literally woke up. I didn't even have a YouTube channel. I literally woke up one morning in July last year and it's like, oh, I'm going to interview 100 men. And boom, I started a YouTube channel, got my friend on for first guest and went from
amazing.
there. I didn't have any planning I didn't question it. I just thought I was a bit nervous, but I just work through. You just do number one, and then you do number two, and then you do number three, and and here we are. You're number 73. So I've got 27 more to go.
Incredible. Well done.
Thank you.
That's really remarkable.
Mikaal, I'd like to bring up the topic of authenticity. Now, this is something that has come up with many of the men that I've interviewed, that once they were able to find their authentic selves, everything became better in their lives. Now, we're talking about polarity as well. And you might be aware there's some polarity teachers that say men need to be 90%, 80% masculine, or women need to be 80. There's all these ratios thrown out. Whereas from my interviews, I've understood that, wherever a man is on that spectrum, and some men have said they feel more feminine than masculine, to me, that is a healthy place to be, healthy masculinity and healthy femininity. What are your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, again, if I hear anyone saying men need to be or should be this, or men should be that, my eyebrow generally tends to raise. I think there are generalities that are very useful and are generally true. For example, 99% of all human beings do identify with the body that they're born into. Like, that's just true. And there are also a small percentage, but there are people that exist in a different way. So I think, as far as the metric I like to use is, do you feel fulfilled and happy in the place that you're at, in the orientation that you are in the world? And is the world responding to that by giving you more of the things that you want? Is there that alignment? To me, authenticity, we can talk about it all you want, but in my experience, when I'm the most authentic, when I'm the most aligned with, often for me, what feels like something beyond myself is moving through me. There's something greater than me. I am subservient to something that is working through me. The Greeks would have called it a muse, the Romans a daimon, or something like that. I think that's right. Or anyway, that authenticity, at least for me, there's the as above, so below principle in alchemy, where the outer world meets me in my authenticity with authenticity. So the kismets, the synchronicities, the things start to line up. pop on Facebook and you see the post for my show, and here we are talking a couple weeks later. It's like, yeah, I think it's interesting because for a long time, the way I was living my life felt authentic. It felt really authentic until I kind of got uncomfortable and then sort of had this realization of, wow, like that way of being feels really authentic to me because, again, it's the way I've been for a long time. So it's like the idea that the devil, versus, they're it's why people stay in often in unhealthy relationships, because that's better than nothing. So it's interesting to take as I've gotten older, to have a view back through my life on different things and be able to sort of look at things differently, of like, wow, I really felt like I was living my best life and I was completely out of alignment. I was completely out of integrity in that relationship and had no idea. But in the moment, I felt authentic because that's how I was raised. So in the work that I do, and it's not my idea, but I think one of the biggest journeys that I think all of us are on right now, all of humanity, is sort of penetrating or surrendering, depending on how you want to look at it, to use the masculine feminine frame, penetrating or surrendering to the conditioning, the way we were raised, the ideas that have come in about who we are and how we are and what we think and what we believe. That was mom, that was dad, that was teacher, that was priest, that was society. And wow, I thought I was attracted to this person, but I'm actually attracted to this person. And for me specifically, there was a very specific form of feminine energy that I was really attracted to for a long time. And guess what? It was very masculinized women, because that was the model that my mom very much had. And again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that at all. I want to continue to reiterate that. I'm going to continue to reiterate that. But what that would result in was them holding the masculine energetic in the relationship and me holding the feminine relationship. But in my essence, again, to borrow from Data's terminology, I have a masculine essence and they had a feminine essence. So there was this sort of counterbalance happening where things would get kind of herky jerky, and it never felt good. It felt good initially, and then a few months in, it would all go to hell. And I think a lot of us have that experience of like the familiarity with someone. Oh my God, I've known you for forever. We must have had 20 past lives together. And yeah, you're so familiar. You're so familiar. You're so familiar. It's like, yeah, they are familiar. They're your mom. They're your dad. That's why they feel familiar. And so in a way, this is what I talk a lot about in my coaching work with couples and particularly with women, but men as well. There's this way in which the best way that I found to work through that conditioning is in relationship. The two-bodied practice, having a mirror that you get to work through versus just you working through your own stuff. It's really valuable to have someone to help you discover what your authenticity really is, where you really are beyond your anxious attachments, where you really are beyond your avoidant attachment. Where are you really when you're secure? Who are you attracted to really when you're secure? So what was fascinating for me is, again, I keep shouting him out because he's a beast. My mentor, Justin Patrick Pierce, gave me a very profound challenge at the end of the hardest relationship that I've ever been in. And when I came out of it, I was a mess, a real mess. And I'd been triggered all the way into like early childhood wounding. Like I'd had a full dissociative experience. It was really rough. And he's like, yeah, you're addicted to the heroin of this particular energy of the feminine. So my challenge to you is 9 months of celibacy. My challenge to you, just like if you were actually addicted to heroin or crack cocaine, we've got to get that out of your system, and your system has to have time to reset, to see what it is without that predilection, what you're actually attracted to. And, God bless him. I really took it to heart. I did the practice. I took a real break from again, I want to be careful in how I say this, the distraction of the feminine, because for a long time I used women and dating and that as a distraction from doing what I know I needed to do, which is working on my purpose. So during those 9 months, I had a real effulgence, this real blossoming of my mission, my purpose, my men's work. The first iterations, and rough as they were, started to come through because my energy was not going out, it was sort of going in. And then as a result of that, suddenly this girl ended up asking me out, and I was like, oh no, I'm not really into that. And then a month later I ran into her again, and it was like, oh, hi there. It was a completely different thing. And it took me a second to realize, oh my gosh, this is the same person. What's changed? And I looked at my watch and I was like, oh my gosh, I met her 8 months into this practice. And as of yesterday, it's literally like to the day, 9 months. And so I don't know how he did that. He's a wizard. He's a lot of things. Justin, thank you if you're listening. But my whole orientation of attraction shifted. So it's wild. It's wild how much I got from this. To me, fluency, polarity feels like a language. It feels like something that you can become fluent in, just like Spanish or Italian. There's a language to it. And once you start to see it, you see it everywhere. And it's an incredibly, just like learning music, the way music, I think, should be taught in all schools. It's such a useful, universal language. There's so much there. So,
so
yeah.
So for men that can recognize themselves where you were, that they're attracted to, let's say, women that are more operating from the masculine, what tips can you give them to start embodying, if they wish to, more of their masculine energy?
That's a great question. And again, if you wish to do it, there's lots of ways to do it. There's I think this 5,000-year-old Tibetan scroll, there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. So ancient Tibetan wisdom there from Reese's. There's lots of ways up the mountain. There's lots of different ways that are right for you. For me, it was diving into the study of what those energies are and how they tend to manifest themselves in the world. So again, not always, but generally, those energies will manifest themselves in certain ways. Directionality is generally a masculine energy, not always, and it can move through a female body. But for me, it was really useful to dive into the nitty gritty of what are some of these qualities, how do they tend to represent, how am I representing them, and what are the habits of the ways that I am living my life, really. So again, to me, it was very much a recognition that, again, I want to just be careful in the way I speak about this and keep it to my own experience. Getting into my body, getting in the gym, doing stereotypically masculine things. A lot of the men who have done a lot of work on their feminine side, which was me, we lovingly call them snags in my world, sensitive new age guys. They're the stage 2 guys in the data pantheon. Men who have prioritized the development of their sensitivity, their sensitivity, their vulnerability, their ability to be super present, and their expression and all those things. But often that comes at the expense of the more traditional qualities that we think of for masculine men: strength, direction, timeliness, these kinds of things. So for me, there was a lot of discovery around, wow, how am I showing up in the world? Like, do I do what I say I'm going to do? Am I punctual with time? What does my calendar look like? So again, right, the idea of structure versus freedom, kind of like back to the preschool that we're talking about. Both are necessary.
Yes.
But it's really, for me, there's generally, with everyone, there's an imbalance in some direction. So some guys have, I've got an amazing brother, again, one of my guys from Tribe Men's Community. His name is Michael Holt, and his whole thing is called savage and saint. And so what he talks about, he does it so brilliantly, is that there's this idea for men where there's savage energy, there's the warrior, there's the ability to penetrate and take what we want and claim what we want, do it, to do it in integrity versus shadow. But then there's the saint, there's the pacifist, the peaceful warrior, the one who's, open and sensitive and vulnerable. And both are right, both are good. Most men, most humans have an imbalance in some direction. So for me, I was that sensitive new age guy. I very much was the nice guy of whatever you want to do, honey. And it's so frustrating to look back on some of those relationships where these women didn't really know what was wrong or what they were trying to do, but they were really kind of coming at me, like really kind of trying to get me to stand up, to create a boundary, to stand up for myself, to in some ways tell them what to do, again, from an integrated place. So yeah, for me, it was, learning how to fight, going to a jiu-jitsu class, going to Muay Thai, learning how to cultivate your warrior energy. Because if you're peaceful, if you're a man of peace, if you're a pacifist, because that's your only option, you're not actually a pacifist. In a way, it's like, I think of Dr. King, Martin Luther King, and his whole thing was nonviolence, but there was a lot of violence in that man. You have to have a warrior's capacity to stand up to that type of oppression and not fight back. So there's this quality that Mr. Holt talks about so beautifully, and then I fold into a lot of the work that I do around conscious combat. So getting guys, into the circle, and we wrestle, we fight, we use foam bats, and we allow that aggression to come out in a healthy way. Because what happens for a lot of people, if they have it suppressed and not available, it'll pop out in unhealthy ways. So there's a lot of, again, there's no wrong way to eat Reese's here. There's lots of ways to start to practice the other side of the equation. And the way I found best was becoming fluent in both sides of the equation, and then trying certain things out. What feels good to me, leaning into my edges.
Yeah. Awareness. This is such good information. Thank you, Michael. Now we've got about half an hour left, and oh gosh, I could talk to you for hours on this, but I want to ensure that you get the opportunity to say what needs to be said. So remember, this is you talking to men in the audience, and there are lots of women that watch that get a great insight into masculinity, but mainly it's you talking to men. So what would you like to talk about? What is important for men to hear from your experience?
You're worth it. You matter. There's a place for you in this world. Something that I get emotional about, because I see so many men right now who are just demoralized, who are just absolutely demoralized, who don't know how to be in the world because they've taken on this idea that because they're men, they are somehow toxic. Because they're men, they are somehow privileged. Because they are men, they are part of this patriarchal, tyrannical force that is destroying the planet. And I reject that. And I will say that I absolutely do agree with what feminism has pointed to, and how it has shown how the shadows of men have really been a problem for a long time. That we know that any society flourishes to the degree that it liberates its women to join the workforce and to join free society. We have the metrics. It benefits the whole society. It's not a question. It's really a question of how long are you going to limit your own country and culture's growth from GDP to emotional intelligence by suppressing women? How long is Saudi Arabia going to continue to do that? How long are all these nations that still do that? How long is it going to take them to wake up? And there is a shadow to feminism. And it's time that we talk about the unintended consequences of feminism, that again, and this is why my podcast is called Remasculation. My mom is a fucking badass. She's an incredible woman. Second wave feminism did so much for all of us, and it's crucial. Me Too did so much for all of us. And there's always a shadow to everything. So men and women, right? To the degree that men feel powerless, to the degree that men feel less than, or like they can't contribute, or like they shouldn't contribute, or that they need to step down, like they need to soften or weaken themselves or pacify themselves, we all lose. And I get it. Like what I'm talking about here, and this is why I'm doing the work that I do. It's about creating integrated men in the world, men that can operate from both sides of the equation, from strength and sensitivity, men that can kindness and killer instinct, humor and depth. All of these things are critical, I think, for men to really have in the world and be embodied in, and be able to bring those attributes forward so that you can be sensitive, you can be vulnerable, you can be an amazing lover, but you're also fit, fierce, and formidable in the bedroom, in the boardroom, and on the battlefield. Like, these are the types of men that I think our world really needs. Enough of this one side of the political aisle or another fighting against ourselves. It's like, are you man enough to develop the qualities of both sides, to familiarize yourself with the shadows of both and the brilliances, integrate what's powerful for you, and move forward? There's an amazing quote from a book that was incredibly moving for me and important in my journey. I read it when I was 20. It's called Hagakure. It's the Japanese book of the samurai Yamamoto Tsunetomo. It's a collection of sayings that this old samurai said to his student, and his student wrote down. And it's hilarious because it's like 15th century Japan, and this old samurai is like, kids these days, they're a bunch of wimps. My day, we were the good samurais. There's no good samurais anymore. But then he gives this piece of advice, which is like, in the absence of a good role model, it's your duty as a young man to build a role model from different places. So find a man who's really good at one attribute, bring in that quality. Find another man who's really good at this quality, bring it in. What resonates with you? Go study that. Go study this. Make of yourself a man who is, as my man Jordan Peterson likes to say, a dangerous, but not a danger. Someone who has the capacity to inflict violence as an act of love, as an act of protection, against someone who would harm you or those that you care about, but also the capacity to, in that infliction of violence, take care of that person that you're maybe taking down, or that animal that you're taking down, or whatever it is. So there's a place for men in this world. And again, I want to push back, and we're one species here. It's not men versus women. It's not the battle of the sexes. It should be the ballad of the sexes. And how do we bring that back? Because weak men, guess what, ladies? That's your dating pool. That's your dating pool. And if I had a freaking dollar for every woman who comes up to me and says, where are all the good men? It's like, well, they're busy listening to the tenets of radical feminism, which told them that they're the problem. And so, and again, I don't just say this willy-nilly. This was my lived experience. And again, there was no point that my mother came up and said, son, you're a man, you need to shut the fuck up and, not be that way in the world. I take responsibility for that I took on from my society. I'm a big guy, right? I'm the one that made the choice to subdue myself in a lot of ways. But there are ways for men to be confident and competent at the same time. And that's the opposite of power. That's the opposite of just power to grab and control. It's like real power comes from competence and being really good at something. So figure something out that you can do to get really good at. And your gift is going to come. And once you have it, that's enough. You don't have to save the world one man at a time. I really thought that I had to save the fucking planet when I was a kid. I was like, this place is fucked up. I got to fix it. That did a lot of a lot of sleepless nights, let's just say. So yeah, I'll pause there, but I really, we need you guys. We need you guys in the fight, and it's time to be aware of the way we're speaking about men, and that it has an effect on people. It particularly has an effect on our young boys and an effect on our young men. And so, to the degree we want good men in the world, we need to start engendering good men from the start and empowering them, and not just focusing on one or the other, but yeah, rising tide, raising all boats.
Yeah, thank you. Amazing. Now, Michael, a lot of women watch this, so I'd like to ask you to talk to women now. What, as a general, as a collective, what piece are we missing? What do we need to understand about men that maybe we're not being so aware of?
Mm. There's a lot of ways I want to go with this. I recently went through an incredible initiatory process where this particular organization brought in, it was a missing link for me, because for a long time, for years, I've been thinking, like, how do we get men to understand women better? How do we give women an embodied sense of what it means to be a man and what men go through? And so my partner and I, her name is Touch Koppel is her name, my beloved, and we started doing men's and women's circles together. So instead of just men's circle, women's circle, we would have men and women come together. We'd have the men and women together, do some prompts together, separate the groups, come back, do a lot of work like that. But I went through this process where the men did men's work with the women circled around and witnessing. And then the women were invited to come and join the men as brothers in female bodies. And they got to go through an initiatory process as though they were men doing the work that we do, which is very much about discomfort and finding comfort in a state of discomfort. So it was this amazing process of getting to really, for the women, kind of see what it is that we go through, and talking about the tension that men are constantly holding, the pressure that we're constantly holding to be men, to hold ourselves, to hold our partners, to hold our kids, to hold our friends, to hold our family, to hold our community, to hold our planet, all these things, and pushing on us all the time. And it's intense in here. It's really intense in here sometimes. But to the degree that you can acknowledge us, we really want to be just acknowledged and seen in what we do, and appreciated in what we do. I think men really need appreciation from the feminine, because so much of what we just used to do has sort of been, I don't want to say taken, but it's been repurposed. So much of what men used to do that made us men is now no longer just men doing it, or maybe women are even doing it better. You know, there's more women in medical school now, there's more women in law school now than there are men. So a lot of men just don't know what to do or how to be a man right now at all. And, you know, before you say, boo-hoo, dude, yeah, you should be feeling that way. Know that that man is your son. He's your husband. He's your father. He's your brother. He's your lover. And men are really going through it right now. And we're trying to figure out how to be in relation to you. And a lot of us are afraid to even come up and talk to you. Because there is nothing more terrifying to a man than coming up and talking to a beautiful woman, because you're the destination we're all trying to get to. And now we're add in, oh my gosh, maybe I'm going to say the wrong thing and I'm going to get canceled, or I'm going to get, I'm going to get called toxic, or I'm going to get called this. So there's a whole extra layer of fear. And so a lot of men are just bailing out. Porn use is through the fucking roof. People are having less sex. And I think it's for a lot of reasons, but I think men are just really terrified right now. So that's something to be aware of. And I would say two other things I want to speak to. One is that, again, I hear a lot of women that come up to me and say, where are all the good men? I'm doing my work. Where's my king? There's this idea that Data talked about that really hit me. And it's this idea of you always attract your reciprocal. So what that means is that you attract the perfect representation for the opposite of the energy that you're emanating, whether you're aware of it or not. So a lot of women, I think, right now have this idea that their men are supposed to show up fully formed. They're supposed to show up like the king is supposed to land on your door. But the Beauty and the Beast story, I think, gets this really beautifully. I can certainly speak to this. You know, my woman touch has absolutely made me the man that I am today. And she's done it in a lot of really brilliant, amazing ways, without emasculating me. She's called me up into my greatness, and she's been able to help carve the bullshit out of me by telling me the truth, not tolerating, telling the truth. So honesty in real time is our mantra. To the degree you can tell the truth in real time in your relationships, you keep resentment at the door, and resentment is the relationship killer. So women, you know, do your work too, and realize that a lot of you are these, you know, sort of the products of feminism. You're a badass, you know, boss babe with money in the bank, and you're holding this masculine frame. And for a lot of men, they can't out masculine that. So if you're looking for a masculine man, the amount of masculine energy that you're holding in your life, again, whether conscious or unconscious, is going to be something that is going to influence the types of men that are attracted to you. So there aren't a lot of super alphas out there. And if you have a lot of alpha energy, masculine energy, there's something to consider there. So again, we're doing our work. I know you ladies are out there doing your work, and you know, it's important. It's important. But I want to say just finally too, for women, and the same for men, right? It's like the men that I talk to, it's like you're struggling in a relationship, you're having a hard time, you got to work on your mom issues. And I think for ladies, you know, you got to work on your daddy issues. And I think something that a lot of women are realizing is in the way of them attracting the partner they really want, of having the relationship and the marriage and the life they really want, is the way they feel about men. So if you think that men are toxic, if you think that the patriarchy is suppressing you and why you don't have the life you should be living, if you think men are just privileged assholes, but then you're trying to date one, again, whether you're conscious of that or not, that mindset, that ideology is going to be poisoning the well of your relationship. So to the degree, and listen, I am not saying, there are women that I know who have never had a positive experience with a man or a male being in their life. So I am not in any way excusing any of the shit that men have done or any of the things that men have done to you. But to the degree you can start to work through and heal your relationship to men, to the masculine, to your dad, to your brother, to your ex, to your partner, to your abuser, is the degree that you can start to radiate a different type of energy, and that energy is going to attract a different type of reciprocal. And I speak to that from my own lived experience. I speak to that from what I've seen in the work that I do. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful wisdom. Thank you, Michael. Now, I'd like to ask you, what's your highest value as a man?
My word.
Mm.
My word. And I'll say that because it's something that I've struggled with in my life. If you read No More Mr. Nice Guy, I very much, when I was younger, had a way of getting out of trouble or avoiding hurting people's feelings by telling white lies. So not telling the truth. There are a lot of men's fraternities throughout the ages, whether the Knights Templar or the cult of Mithras or any of these ancient warrior traditions, where the defining principle was tell the truth even if it leads to your death. And so there's this sort of masculine fixation on telling the truth. And of course, you know, what is the truth? Well, it's tell the truth to the degree that you believe it is the truth. And to the degree that I do that, my life improves. Not always immediately, because sometimes if I've been lying about something, and my lady will tell you about this, you know, for sure, it's like there were things that I didn't even know I was being dishonest about because it was so ingrained in my way of being. The protective mechanisms to keep my little ones safe were so old that I wasn't aware of them. She was a huge part, and I owe you so much, Touch, for being your artistry at being able to reflect those things to me. But my highest value is the truth, and telling the truth, because I think it was Gandhi who said truth is God, or maybe God is truth. And I think there's certainly some truth in that.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So, what else would you like to say about your podcast? Where let people know about it, where they can find it, and we'll drop all the links below.
Yeah.
And also feel free to talk about any other links or ways that people can find you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the podcast is called Remasculation. It's on Spotify and it's on Apple Podcasts. So if you go and just type in Remasculation, it should just pop up. We just dropped the 3rd episode today. I've got 4 or 5 recorded already. I've got a guest list that I'm just swooning over. I'm just so stoked to be talking about this. And again, the show itself is dedicated to the exploration, the celebration, and the pursuit of healthy masculinity in the modern world. Like, that's the bottom line of what the show is about. And it's my own journey from emasculation to remasculation. And the podcast really stands in service to all of humanity by taking a stand for good men everywhere. That's the idea behind it. And, I want to tie this into a question you asked earlier of what's something that men can do right now to improve their life. This is something I borrowed from my acting life, which is the idea of an elevator pitch. So, you happen to be in the elevator with Martin Scorsese, you know what you do, you're able to talk about yourself in a beautiful way. So something that I have my men do is what I call a mission statement. My mission is the conscious evolution of men and masculinity across this planet in our lifetime. My mission is the conscious evolution of men and masculinity across this planet in our lifetime, one man at a time. That's my jam. That's what I'm all about. That's the encapsulation of my purpose in a sentence. And it's incredibly powerful and useful, not just for men, for all beings. Try it out. Like, what is your mission statement? Why are you here? Writing about that. So the show is really an exploration of how we can be good men in the modern world. And the show is not just for men. The show is absolutely about women. As I mentioned earlier on the show, I'm very curious in taking a look at the unintended consequences of feminism, and the history of men. Something I hear a lot is, well, this idea of toxic masculinity or the patriarchy or male privilege. And it's like, well, these are broad generalizations. I mean, men have also suffered under quote unquote patriarchy. And it's a very small subset of men who are the ones who inflict the types of things that would be construed as toxic or negative. It's a very small subset. And most men are good men, and men have suffered under that. And, I'm a big history guy. History is full of men being sent off to war and dying by the millions to defend our homes, our women, our children. And so there's this beautiful piece of men and masculinity that I want to talk about that I feel like has been sort of, I don't know, swept under the rug somehow. And again, I think it was useful in a lot of ways. I think in the way that these generalizations have been leveled at men in the same way they were leveled at women or minorities is actually kind of brilliant. I don't think it was necessarily intentional, but I think there was some brilliance in like, well, what is it like for men to be generalized? It's like, fuck, it sucks. Okay, well, it sucks to be generalized. It sucks to be ismed. All men are like this. Well, that's as ignorant as saying all women are like this or all Black people are like this. It's time, I think, to really start to get away from that and take each other as individuals again, judging each other by not the color of our skin, but the content of our character. Again, to quote my main man, Dr. King. And my favorite quote of all time, it was my senior yearbook quote under my picture is, if a man hasn't found something he's willing to die for, he is not fit to live. And it's interesting, right? Because I didn't think I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up back then, but that thread was there. So again, to the degree men and humans that you can figure out what it is that's important to you enough that you would die for it. That's the thing that's going to fuel you. That's the thing that's going to bounce you out of bed in the morning. You're not going to need caffeine. You're not going to need cocaine. You're not going to need pornography. You're not going to need all these substitutes. Instagram and social media and the cult of comparison that just decimates us online. You're going to have a fuel source driving through your system that is the stuff of legend and is the path to your personal legend. What's that from? The Alchemist? I think that's The Alchemist. So, yeah.
Yeah, great stuff. What do you think of the theory that, with this, whoever invented the term toxic masculinity, and I would say it was promoted by media, what do you say that was an intentional weapon against the rise of healthy masculinity?
Did you say was it an intentional weapon?
Yes, I'm saying the theory that it was an intentional weapon used by the media and the powers behind the media to suppress the rise of healthy masculinity against, what's happening in the world at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of it's so funny to keep using the term conspiracy theorist when so many conspiracy theories that were theories years ago now are true. But I think there's something to that. I don't think it was initially used with the intention of we're going to suppress men with this. I think a lot of women that were at the forefront of the feminist movements were there because they really suffered at the hands of men, specific men. Like they incurred rape, they incurred abuse, they incurred all kinds of really intense things. And so I don't think we can blame people for having a view of toxicity from a certain people. Again, it's like, a kid that I grew up with, by a lot of traditional terms, you would say is a pretty racist guy. Well, he used to get beat up by black guys all the time. Every day going home from middle school, this gang of kids, it could have been anybody, happened to be mostly black kids. They weren't all black kids, but he got beat up by those kids every day. So he has a real issue with black people. There's a connection there. It doesn't mean that it's okay to be that way necessarily, but I think we owe a lot of understanding and forgiveness to women and to the feminists for just pointing to something that was happening in some degrees. I think, yeah, there's a really interesting theory around the cabal behind, well, if you want to subdue a society, if you want to overtake a society, or if you can't overtake a society militarily, start to poison it from within, start to poison the way that we look at men. But again, I'm an eternal optimist. And I also, again, I think this comes with getting older. I have more of a view to the future. I'm also a big history guy. So I'm used to looking at things from a broader lens. I can see the brilliance of this moment that we're living through right now, as far as the types of men that it's starting to create and that it's going to be creating in the future. And I get really fucking excited about that because I am surrounded by those men. They are my mentors, my friends, my clients, family members. These men are starting to emerge. And I think, what is the adage that's going around, strong men create good times, good times create weak men create hard times create strong men create good times create weak men. I think there's cycles. I think we're moving through cycles, and I think it's important for all of us who are convinced that the world is about to end. Maybe it is, but the apocalypse is always coming, and it's in every generation, and it's real because we die. We're mortal. The apocalypse is real, but before you let Putin or whatever's going on in your head spiral you, climate change, whether it's real or not, before you let it sort of swing you off course, like what are the things that you can do right now in your life? What are the things that you can take control over? And so, yeah, I think I'm really excited to explore the idea of toxic femininity and what that looks like and how that can emerge in female and male bodies. And what are the qualities of that? Because, manipulation is I would say the quintessential category of of toxic femininity and what that can look like. And I think we're starting to see that in a big way. I think we're sort of seeing that play out in a lot of, we don't have time to jump into this, but just in a lot of the political policies or governmental policies that we've seen enacted over the last few decades and what it's created in a lot of the inner cities. Again, I'm very much an independent. I think the liberals have a lot of brilliances and a lot of shadows, and I think the conservatives have a lot of brilliance and a lot of shadows. But can we bring the brilliances, create this third level or this next level of integration from both sides? That's what excites me, and that's what I'm excited about for men, for women, for all of us, whatever body you're in, however you orientate, whatever pronouns you want to use. It's, hey man, this is it. So
yes, Mikaal, we are on time, but I was just going to ask you if you do have another few minutes, because I do have a couple of questions, or would you like to wrap up?
yeah, I've got a little bit of extra time, so
Okay, so
just double check something real quick. Okay, cool.
all right,
I got a dinner date with lady tonight. Just wanted to coordinate the timing. No, I'm good. We can riff.
Oh, thank you. So could the term toxic masculinity or femininity be replaced by wounded masculinity, wounded femininity, unhealthy masculinity? Is
Yes.
toxic such a sort of a shock tactic? Can we use the term? We don't like using the word toxic, but can we use unhealthy or wounded? Is that a softer, more compassionate way of approaching it?
Very much so. And I've already started trying to reappropriate the term and use alternatives, which I think is how you start to move away from terminology that's been weaponized. And I think that term has very much been weaponized. And again, I think it's myopic in one sense, because again, to presume that even the negative qualities may exist in someone, but there's certainly positive qualities in there as well. So I think generalizing someone is just a mistake to begin with. We need general terms in some ways to refer to groups, but there are ways to do it in integrity and ways to do it not in integrity. So yes, I absolutely agree. Wounded masculine, unhealthy masculine, unconscious masculine, unintegrated masculine, feminine, what have you. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. So where does the heart come into all of this?
It's right in the center. It's right there. It's never left. I do a lot of work in the realm of psychedelic integration. I've been very fortunate to be able to support people in that capacity. And as much as I have been able to do that, I also share in Jung's warning about being aware of unearned wisdom. So I think, a lot of people that rely on psychedelics too much can get you in trouble. But the most profound experience of my life, the most profound single experience of my life was the first time I had an MDMA experience, and my heart cracked open. And I thought I had a pretty open heart to begin with. I'd been to acting school. I was a 5 rhythms dancer, an athlete, a musician, a poet, all these things, right? And the heart is always, the heart belongs in the center of everything. And I think I think that there is great peril in moving forward in any endeavor without the heart being considered and the heart being a part of the equation. I think that heart is something that men have in abundance. It's the thing that gets them up off the canvas at the 9 counts when they should just stay down and they fight back to win. It's the part in a man that keeps him trying time and time again and getting back up and heart is everything. It's really everything. And I think, there's it's one of those quotes that I think has been attributed to a lot of people. I heard it attributed to a number of different native tribes, but the idea that the longest journey of a man's life is from his head down to his heart. And I think we're all born in that heart space and then get scrambled up into the head. When we're forced to choose between our own intuitive, heart-centered way of being and the untruths that our caregivers invite us into, often unintentionally and without the intention to do harm. But I think we get divorced from our heart space pretty early in life, most of us. And so I think there's a critical journey to get back into that space.
Fascinating. So when you said you had your heart cracked open, what did that feel like physically and emotionally?
It was, well, I'll tell you, it was Halloween 2013 in the middle of New York City. I was out with friends in the middle of, anyone who's ever been to Halloween in New York, you know, it's wild. It's just throngs of people. Everyone's in costume, all kinds of just humanity and devilry and happening everywhere. And, you know, ironically, I was wearing a mask, and for the first time in my life on that medicine, it felt like I wasn't wearing a mask. And I literally had the sensation of my heart, like this vibrating center of energy kind of getting more intense and more intense and more intense. And then an actual explosion, almost like a grenade in my chest. And this deep breath of like a sigh, like an orgasmic or like you've been punched, even just the breath taken out of me. And I'm pretty sure my eyes were closed, but seeing all these fragmented pieces of my heart kind of explode outwards and then freeze like a freeze frame, and then start to shake and shake and shake and shake, and then come back together in my heart in this image of the Sacred Heart from Catholicism, the Sacred Heart of Christ consciousness sort of burst into flame. And I am not in any way saying that I occupy Christ consciousness, but in very rare occasions. But in that moment, I started weeping. I literally dropped to my knees in the middle of New York City and started to just bawl. And I could feel all the pieces of fear in my body, like the issues in the tissues, you know, that we talk about in trauma work and embodiment work, somatic work, just like dropping out. And like, oh my gosh, there's that piece in my right arm where my third grade teacher said that thing to me about my essay, and I took it this way, and zoom. And then, oh, there's that thing my mom said when I was in sixth grade, zoom. And it was just like, wow, like this map of my body. And all the fear was gone. There was just no fear. My heart was just like, I was like a little kid. I was a little kid. There was no social anxiety. I'm sure I looked like a bit of a weirdo, but I was just like, I just talked to everybody, and there was no fear. There was no, are they going to think I'm weird? If they do, great. They can do that. It's okay. So there was just this incredible heart opened space. It was profound. It was profound. And this is in no way an invitation for people to go and do that. That's not the experience that everybody has, it turns out, as I came to discover. But it was, for me, it was a profoundly healing experience, and very much, I think, a critical step in the early days of my awakening, or my journey into more of my true self.
So how would you suggest that men get in touch with their hearts?
Wow.
You said that a lot
That's
of
a
men,
great question.
it's very much prevalent in the masculine.
Yeah.
But then you said you thought you were in touch with your heart until you had this awakening. So, you know, how do men explore that portal?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's this interesting idea in some of the tantric traditions of the more sort of esoteric, sacred sexual traditions, where men penetrate through the sacral space and are penetrated through the heart space, and women are penetrated through the sacral space and they penetrate through the heart space. So something I heard Mr. Data say once to a group of us was the best spiritual practice for a man is a woman. I do think that's true. I think that's falling in love, playing with puppies, being around children, the puppies and kids, animals and children, I would say the fast track to, if you need a heart open moment, the ways to sort of just get into that energy. But again, I think it's still purpose. I think when you're on purpose, the heart is alive. It invigorates, it accelerates, it enlivens, it comes alive. And I think the heart deadens to the degree that we don't do that. I don't think it's a coincidence that the number one killer of men is heart disease and heart attack, because we, to the degree that, what did I say earlier, that I would associate toxic femininity with, unconscious femininity with manipulation. I would attribute unconscious or toxic masculinity to disconnection, and that you would have to be disconnected from your heart to pour toxic waste into a stream, to rape a woman, to kill someone outside of self-defense. You have to be, you cannot be connected to your heart or your deeper sense of connection to something greater than yourself. So that's why, I mean, I think it's different for every man. I think there are general paths to the hearts. I think there are entire traditions developed to getting you there. But I think the main armoring for men who have been wounded tends to be around the heart space. In the same way, I think the main armoring for women who have been wounded can often be around the yoni, around the sacral space. Not always, but wow, yeah, spending time actually asking your heart. I think that's something I do with a lot of my guys at the beginning is, instead of just thinking with your mind, like, where do I want to go to dinner? Oh, let's see, Chinese, sushi, what do I want to, it's like, no, pause, actually ask your heart, like it was a person. Hey, heart, where do you want to go for dinner? And then shut up and actually listen and see if you can actually hear anything. And why there are lots of reasons why meditation is important and useful and why everyone should do it. And it's not just because mindfulness is great. If you want to get in touch with your intuition, if you want to get in touch with your heart wisdom, with your gut wisdom, with your sex wisdom, if you want to get in touch with any wisdom outside of the thinking mind, you have to learn to quiet the body, because the only instrument that intuition has to communicate with you is through bodily sensation. So to the degree you can start to, again, just very basically, what do I want for dinner? What do I want to do on my day off? What should I get my partner for Valentine's Day? Instead of just thinking through it, thinking. The rational mind is a beautiful tool, but it's very limited in what it can do. And so I think just getting in the habit of asking and starting to recognize that you have a capacity to ascertain real information from different parts of your body, but from your heart specifically. There's real value there, real value.
Amazing. Last question that I always ask my men, so thank you. Could you please deliver a final message to men? What would you like to say to any men that are struggling at the moment?
Wow. I want to say a couple things. I'll say that anything that annoys you is teaching you patience. Anyone who abandons you is teaching you how to stand up on your own 2 feet. Anything that angers you is teaching you forgiveness and compassion. Anything that has power over you is teaching you how to take your power back. Anything that you hate is teaching you unconditional love. Anything that you fear is teaching you courage to overcome your fear. And anything you, see if I can remember how it ends. Anything you can't control is for teaching you how to let go and trust the universe. That's Jackson Kiddard, I believe. Gosh, there's so, we need you, man. Like, we need you in the fight. We need you. I need you. She needs you. We need you. There is value in you and what you have to give, and you have to go in and get it. There's something really beautiful about the female adolescent rite of passage, when the menstrual cycle just kind of comes and just arrives, and women don't have to do anything. It happens to them. You become the vehicle for life itself, as Joseph Campbell would say. But for men, it's like we have to go through something. We have to do something. There's a process that has to be enacted, and you are that process. And if you're depressed, great. That's the process. There's something in you telling you in that depression where you need to go, what you need to do, what your place is in the world and in this universe. And I'm going to see if I can remember this too. This is the true joy in life, in being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one. That's George Bernard Shaw, this idea that that's where your joy and your mission comes from, of being recognized by yourself, the purpose that you're in, you realizing the value in it. And that there's so much available to you if you are willing to walk that path, if you are willing to lean into discomfort, and in that state discover the true comfort that comes to a man that realizes that no matter what happens, he's going to be okay. He's got it. And yeah, I'll end there, I think.
Michael, this has been one of the best episodes of Heart Warriors. So I just want to thank
wow.
from my heart to yours, just such good wisdom, insights, lived embodiment. So very grateful. Thank you so much for being here.
It's been a real honor. And I want to just acknowledge you for doing this, and for encouraging us and men, and being a stand for us, and modeling what that looks like, and doing this work. It's really, 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 really important. And I honor you, and I see you, and I'm so appreciative of you listening to that voice that told you to do this. Thank you. It's been an honor, truly.
Thank you. You made me all emotional.
Good. That's the truth.
Thank you.
It's the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll pop all Michael's details, where you can find him and his podcast and his coaching
Yes.
below in the description. If you could message me those, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I spell my name a little uniquely, thanks to my hippie mom. I love you, Mom. It's Michael, spelled Mikaal, and then Bates is the last name, B as in boy, ATES. You can find me www.michaelbates.com.
Brilliant. Thank you. So thanks for watching, everyone. I'm sure it's not the last time we'll see Michael. We might get.
I hope not. This was a blast.
Of Man Speak. See, Heart Warriors, every man gets one episode, but then some men come back to an offshoot series called Man Speak, where we talk for 90 minutes on a topic of their choice.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
That'd be a blast.
Yes, so you'll be getting an invitation for that. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. Everyone, please like, share, subscribe, and thanks for watching.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.